I believe we are on YouTube now, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to our first meeting of the year. Again, in response to COVID-19, we are continuing to hold council meetings electronically. Members of the public are invited to participate in the meeting of council by accessing the meeting, which is live streamed on our Middlesex Centre YouTube channel. There are no additions to the agenda, so I'm going to ask if any members of council have any pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare.
I do, Madam Mayor, regarding the electric drain. I have talked to clerk and notified him of such a conflict. Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Brennan. There are no delegations or presentations or petitions today, so we are going to move to the Court of Revision. The motion before us is that council adjourn its regular meeting in order to sit as a Court of Revision under Section 97 of the Drainage Act as amended to consider the Ettrick Municipal Drain 2020 with members Amanda Stratton from the City of London and Councillor Arts and myself in the chair. Is there a mover, please? Councillor Scott and Councillor Shipley. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried then, and we are sitting in the Court of Revision. We proceed in a determined order. The first item is to call the meeting to order, and that would be at 9:34. Next, we will consider appeals. We have received one, which has been distributed to the committee members. I can't see Ms. Stratton on the same screen as, so I'll ask if either of you have questions. I won't probably see your hand. If you would just make a noise or call my attention, then I'll know to go to you. So as I was saying, I would entertain any questions from the members about the information we have received. Councillor Arts.
Not for sure procedure. Doesn't Mr. Tchorek speak first, or do we comment after he speaks?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we are asking for questions from members about the document that we've received at present. We will we have Mr. and Mrs. Frank and Leslie Tchorek online, so they will have an opportunity to comment as well. Did you have a question, Councillor?
It's regarding the letter from, or yeah. It's a comment regarding the letter from Mr. Tchorek. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Okay. So you want me to say my spiel now then?
Yes, please.
Okay. I read Mr. Tchorek's letter, and I'm going to agree with the report because the large part of Mr. Tchorek's cost is the improvements to the branch, the Kennedy drain, which will benefit him. And also there was some cost involved with the drain because it was not properly maintained. But that being said, I'm a farmer and we've got several farms that are on the bottom end of watersheds. And I always feel that the bottom end of the watershed is overcharged for stuff that has to be done. And it comes down to the benefit portion that the engineers use in their report. And if a neighbor's been blowing out your tiles and dumping hot water on you for years, I don't understand why he doesn't get charged for the opportunity to get rid of his water the right way. That being said, the rules for assessment go through the Drainage Act, and any changes to the Drainage Act need to be approved by OMAFRA. So I honestly think the Drainage Act needs to be reviewed because, like I said, the bottom end shouldn't have to proportionally pay more for to benefit someone else to drain their properties. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Ms. Stratton, would you have anything you'd like to clarify or ask at this time? No. Is Mr. DeVos on the line? He is not. Okay, my question is to him. Okay, we'll do that then. Very well. Okay. Mr. Chorek, are you there?
He's on mute.
There we are.
There you are. Good
Yes,
morning.
I am.
Please
Morning,
excuse our
everyone.
pronunciation.
You're very good. You try and say everything. Chicharek, you try and put the T in front of the Charek. So you guys have done very well. Thank you.
Great. Would you like to comment or present your information or clarify anything at this time?
Well, I just want to say that Councillor Arts, I think nailed it with his comments that the Act really does need adjusting, because it doesn't seem to be fair in how it distributes assessments for watershed. And I guess that's why we created this letter or this review, because we felt that when you look at the benefit of adjoining properties, and I'm going to say more upstream, and that their benefit is probably as equal as ours to what we're going to repair with the Kennedy Drain, and yet our cost portion is twice what theirs is. So that kind of what precipitated this whole process. We just feel that with the Kennedy Drain operating properly, with the catch basin repaired, we're not against the work that's proposed at all. So that, to be clear, we're going forward and we're not opposed to it at all. It needs to be done. But I just think that the drain is handling as much water from other properties as it is ours, and yet we're paying a much higher proportion of the cost. So that's really our argument.
Good, thank you. I was going to ask a question too. Maybe I can ask Dan. Dan, if you feel qualified to answer this, or if you'd like to defer to Mike, that's fine too. My question then is, when I look at the amounts and I'm trying to understand the argument presented by resident. So my question focuses on, if you were the engineering person, how would you reconcile the amounts that the resident is presenting with the amounts that are documented in the report? So what am I missing, or what am I not understanding, or what do I need to understand to reconcile the two figures?
Well, sorry, I missed part of that. I'm actually on the phone here with Mike. He's just logging on now. I'm the engineer.
Do you want me to wait?
We can. I can also kind of speak to how the benefit is, here's Mike here, how the benefit is determined. As Councillor Arts has noted, that the people at the bottom of the watershed are typically the ones that have to pay more through benefits to deal with upstream water, which is true. The reason they're given that benefit or assess that benefit is because if that drain wasn't there, all the water would just naturally go to their land. So they're the ones receiving benefit from this drain being here. If that drain wasn't there, the top of the watershed would still drain off of their land to lower lands. So I don't know, Councillor Arts, if you mentioned it in what you said here, but the email you sent before, some sort of special assessment for the right for their water to go to lower lands doesn't exist. Maybe that would be something to look at. However, that's how water naturally flows, is downhill. But Mike's here now. He can better speak to all of these assessments.
Good morning.
Good morning. So yes.
I can't, oh, there you are. I don't know how much of the question you heard, or I'm not sure if you want to jump in and or do you want me to re-ask the question and comment on it as well? But basically, my question is, I'm wondering, how do I reconcile the difference in the amounts that I'm seeing, your calculations and the engineering report documents one figure, and the resident has gone through an exercise and said,
line 4. Yes, basically, some of the information in the appeal, it's making reference to certain portions of the property and areas, but when under the Drainage Act, we look at specific areas that are defined, that are servicing particular portions of the drain. And most of the conversation, just excuse me for a second. Most of the conversation and appeal has been on the Kennedy branch. So when you're dealing with the assessments on the Kennedy branch, we have to look at just the tributary areas where the water goes to the Kennedy branch, not the entire property. So when you make reference to the size of properties, not all of those properties are tributary to the Kennedy branch. So that's why in the report, there are separate schedules for each component and the Kennedy branch itself. So the Kennedy branch has a schedule of assessment with particular affected areas listed for that branch. Specifically, reference is made to the farms on the east side of Hyde Park and that they're much larger. Well, only a smaller portion of those properties use the Kennedy branch. The other water from that property would head south or north to different portions of the Ettrick drain.
Okay, thank you.
And I do have, I've gone through the appeal and I do have specific responses to the different, the numbered items that are in that appeal, and I could address each one of them independently.
Please go ahead then.
Okay, I'll do that first, and then afterwards as well, what I would typically do at a quarter revision is go through and explain how we've calculated the actual assessments for that. And I would probably share my screen to show you the actual calculations when I get to that point. But first, I'll address the, I think it's 5 items plus a little bit of a summary at the end of the appeal. I can address those independently. The comment was made that the main source of the waters is from Hyde Park and east. Whereas at the very top where the water gets into the catch basin, that's true. But as you head downstream, you're quickly adding a significant amount of area. And there's 11.1 hectares on the Tachoric property that's tributary to this branch, which when you look at the whole branch as a whole, the Tachoric property has 51% of the entire watershed area. So more than half of the entire watershed area is the Tachoric property. You don't look at just the water that gets in at the very top of the drain. The drain is 500 meters long almost, and there's a whole bunch of area that comes in as you go further downstream, and there's other properties that get in too. There's a little bit of water from the west side of the old railway. There's a severed residential property that would get in near the bottom end. So there are a few other properties that would get into the drain, but as a whole, the Tachoric property is still over 50% of the total area being serviced by the branch. That's item 1. I mean, do you want me to ask questions about item 1 before I move on, or go through all of them first?
That might be a good idea. Does anyone want to ask anything further on that item? Seeing no hands, or I see shaking heads. Go ahead, Mike, to number 2 then.
Okay. Number 2, it's discussing what the Tachoric's thought was on why the drain would have originally been constructed and what it was built for. And that statement is partially true, but it's also, the drain would have been constructed to service and provide drainage for the water that would land on and originate on the Tachoric property as well. Again, having more than 50% of the total watershed area, more than half of the water is going to come from the Tachoric property. And when that occurs, we have to assess benefit as defined in the Drainage Act. And benefit is defined as better control of surface water, better control of subsurface water, increased land value, increased crop production, and all of those things occur on the Tachorric property through a municipal drain. The construction and the existence of that municipal drain does provide all those benefits to the Tachorric property. So, you know, to say that the only reason this was built was the county road or the properties on the other side, you know, based on what typically happens. And also I went back and looked at the original assessments from 1963 when the drain was constructed, and the total assessment to the Tachorric property and a piece of the railway that has been purchased by the Tachorric property was approximately 66% of the total cost of that branch. The assessments in the schedule that I have prepared is less than that. So we're fairly close, but it is fairly consistent with what has been done in the past and what the Drainage Act defines that we do. That would be my end of number 2. Is there any questions on number 2?
Shaking heads. You're good to go.
Okay. Then the number 3 says that the drain does not run through low-lying areas on the farm and therefore has minimal impact on the fields. You know, we've surveyed the drain. The drain does go through the lowest part of that farm where the water wants to leave Hyde Park Road, head west, and then when you get down to the point where there's a stub that comes from the old railway, there's an existing stub in there that's part of the drain now. There is some low-lying pockets in there, both near where our drain is and also near where that stub is. Over at the lowest point would be over near the railway, where the largest ponding of water would occur. But it's directly connected into this drain, and that stub can't function without the municipal tile being there to service it. And then as you start heading north towards 8 Mile, again, the drain is generally in the low-lying area. Once you get closer to 8 Mile Road, the lowest part of the field veers over a little bit to the west, closer to the trees. There's a little piece of bush area there in between the old railway and where the municipal tile is. They veered the tile slightly east to stay from not having to clear the entire amount of trees between the two. It's still a relatively short distance away from the lowest lying area and would still provide benefit for that particular area. So, you know, from what we can see, you know, this municipal drain is not any different than other municipal drains that run through low-lying areas and areas that would want to flood due to water both upstream and from that property. So there's no reason in our mind to be changing the assessments from a normal distribution of benefit and outlet.
Any clarification required on that? Seeing none, I think we're good to go ahead then.
Okay. And then item number 5, it says that the Tachorric property is a substantially smaller parcel of land compared to the property on the east side, and that stems to the very first part of my discussion when I first jumped on the meeting here. In that, you know, the Tachorric property has 11.1 hectares of land that's tributary to the Kennedy branch, and the farm on the east side has only 5.8 hectares of land that's tributary. The farm itself may be bigger than that, but not all of the farm would slope towards this drain and have its water from the whole property get in. There's only 5.8 hectares of that particular farm that would come in this direction. So you don't look at the entire property size, you look at the tributary area to that particular branch.
Okay, is there any other question for our engineering report? I don't see any. Okay, in
Okay,
that case, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. There was some numbers being discussed at the very end of the letter of the appeal, and it made reference to $5,500 of work being completed on the property, and that the total assessment for the whole project as a whole was $7,400. When we look at what we need to assess, we have to look at all of the costs, not just some of the physical work. There's also allowances for compensation to landowners. There's taxes, there's engineering. In this case, there was a significant amount of engineering done to survey and design the drain, come up with the costs for improvements, go through all that exercise at the request of partly at the request of the Choric property. That's all included in the assessment schedule that you have. The total cost of that branch is actually closer to $17,900. So we can't just look at the $5,500 and say that's all that we need to look at. We have to look at distributing the full $17,880. The total assessment of the Choric property of that 17.9 is roughly $7,900. It's $78.92 gross cost. Off of that, the property would be eligible to receive grants and also receive compensation through allowances, so that the net cost on the Kennedy branch to that Choric property is actually $4,201. So some of the references that were made, I think, need to be clarified as well.
Does any of our committee require clarification on any of that content? Okay. In that case, then, okay. Yes, you were, Michael, you were commenting about the content that you wanted to share on screen. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could do that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so you can see now my screen here with the calculations for the assessments.
Yes, we can.
Is that visible? That's visible to you? Okay, so to explain that, typically when we make assessments, we use what's called a modified Tajam method. It was a method established by an engineer back in the 40s and the 50s, where you take a certain amount of assessment generally for regular costs and partition it into benefit and outlet based on proportion of the cost. So it's done by proportion. Then once you've established what the benefit is, you distribute it to those properties that are receiving the benefit. And then the remainder of the cost gets distributed as outlet over the upstream lands or any of the tributary lands where water would get into that particular branch. But under the Drainage Act, there are special assessments. There's Section 26 of the Drainage Act and Section 24 of the Drainage Act for special assessments. Section 26 deals with roads, railways, and utilities. So if there's additional costs to the project due to the construction and operation of a road, railway, or utility, we assess those particular entities the additional cost to the project for what it takes to do that. In this case, we did go through a fairly thorough exercise of surveying, designing, and coming up with the cost and the cost distribution for reconstructing the branch. So there was engineering both for the crossing, the road crossings at 8 Mile and at Hyde Park, where there was engineering time spent. So that assessment was pulled out first at the top here. You can see these special assessments up here are for those entities. There were a couple of catch basins that would have been designed and built if we had proceeded to construct the drain. But as they were dropped off the proposal, there was still some engineering time that was assessed as part of those particular items. There was also cost to locate and expose Enbridge's gas line down at 8 Mile Road, and locating some bell lines as well. So some of those costs get pulled out first. So the total branch cost is $17,880. We take off 6 special assessments to those entities, leaves us $12,800 to be distributed, what we call regular cost, which would be either benefit or outlet to the affected properties. In this case, in the scenario that we have, we assessed 50% of the cost as benefit. So 50% of the 12.8 is benefit. Typically, it is divided up by the length of where the drain is traveling, except for where we come up to a property. The very top property won't have very much length. In this case, Hyde Park Road only has 3 meters of pipe on its property, but they will have, and they do have, a proper direct legal outlet and a sufficient outlet to let their water go into a proper drain. So we increase a direct benefit charge. In this case, we added $1,420 to the benefit to come close to $1,500 benefit, which is $1,475 in this case, to the county for having a direct connection to the municipal drain. Even though we're not actually crossing the county road, there was some extra benefit charged for the direct connection. There would still be some benefit for 8 Mile Road to have a legal outlet for their property as well, which left $4,975 to be distributed as outlet over the watershed. So, I mean, I will go on to the second page, which shows you the distribution of the outlet, the $4,975, but I would first entertain questions on this distribution here, the calculations.
Since the screen is shared, I'll leave it to the members of the committee to jump in if they want to ask anything. I don't hear. Yeah. Okay. The clerk has confirmed that there is no hand up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I'll go to page 2 here. Page 2 shows some of the benefits. There's a benefit column that shows we've added those were calculated on the previous page. The outlets, then we have a total of $4,975. We take the affected areas, the tributary area for each property, and we either factor them up or down based on land use or location. So some properties have a different runoff rate, depends on their land use. In this case, a residential property would have a somewhat higher runoff rate. The Days property is residential, so it has a runoff factor of 1.5, and roads, a county road is substantially higher, and a township road or municipal road is a bit higher as well than what a regular farmer's field. A farmer's field is what we consider the standard of runoff factor of 1. So we factored up some of the properties that have faster runoff due to hard surfaces. If there had been some significant bush areas, we would have reduced some of those. There was a location factor as well. We also look at how much of the drain and where their water enters the drain. So, for instance, the Days property being up near 8 Mile Road would use very little of the drain. Their water enters the drain close to the bottom end, so they're only liable to contribute towards the bottom portion of the drain. Same with 8 Mile Road, you can see that as well. Then you have the Techorik property, where they're at about 2/3 of the drain on average their property would use. And then the properties on the east side have a factor of 1. So their water will use the entire length of the drain. So that's part of the factor. You take the runoff factor and the location factor to create what we call an equivalent area. And then you take the total 4975 and prorate it over those equivalent areas. And that left 1,440 to the Archon property, 447 to the Fry property, 1812 to the Detroit property, 20 to the Days, 104, and then 1117 to Hyde Park, and $35 to 8 Mile. And I'd open up if you have any questions or clarification on those calculations.
I've got one question.
Go ahead, Councillor Arts.
When you do the runoff for a farm field, do you factor in if it's got significant elevation to the field, or it's just always a 1?
Typically, if it's a farmer's field, it would be 1. We assume that it could be systematically tiled. One of the items in the appeal letter referenced the fact that there was no systematic tiling on the property at this time. We assessed for potential use, and that farm may be partially tiled or fully tiled within the next 2 years, 5 years from now. So we assess that it is going to get into that drain. If there's areas that are sloping away from the drain but have subsurface water getting in, we would change the runoff factor down, because sometimes that water gets split in 2 different directions. That occurs. But generally, if the subsurface water and the surface water is liable to get in, we don't factor it higher or lower due to the slope. These drains are designed to function over a 24-hour period. They're not necessarily designed to take a quick thunderstorm that occurs in a couple hours. The runoff will occur in a couple hours. So being a low flow pipe, and the fact that the drainage will occur over a 24-hour period, we don't take slope to adjust those.
Thank you.
And that any other questions?
I don't think so. I don't. I'm told there are. None are appearing. So if you have more to continue with, then.
No, I'm basically done mine. I'll stop my screen share. And. I think Frank put his hand up.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I should ask if we want to hear from the appellant?
You can ask if there's anything further you'd like to hear from the appellant.
Okay. So I'd like to ask then the committee members, would we like to hear more from the appellant before we move on to deliberations then?
Can I say something?
I'm just checking with the members of the committee to see if we're needing more information or comment. Councillor Arts, go ahead.
I'm good.
And Ms. Stratton.
If he has more that he would like to say, I'm quite happy to hear that.
Okay. Do you have some new information to add, Mr. Detroit?
I just wanted to say that we don't have any plans to systematically tile. It's not systematically tiled, small piece of property, and we don't farm it ourselves. We rent it out. So there at this point, we have no plans at all to systematically tile. And I just wanted to say, Mike, thank you for the detail that you provided. Certainly, you know, it's much better to understand where all the numbers come from. So thank you for that.
Okay. I think that brings us to the end of this piece. I'll ask the members of the court, are there any deliberations that you'd like to engage in at this time? Any further comments, discussions? None? In that case, the motion before us is that the Middlesex Centre Court of Revision approves the schedule of assessment for the Ettrick Municipal Drain and the Drainage Works 2020 adopted by bylaw 2020 number 93 as outlined in the report prepared by Spreed Associates, and that the court of revision is hereby adjourned and the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre resume their January 6, 2021 meeting of Council. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Arts, a seconder? Ms. Stratton, anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. DeVos. Happy New Year. Appreciate your thorough response. Happy New Year, Mr. Chichorik. Thank you for submitting your questions and participating in the meeting. All righty, moving on now to the adoption of the minutes. The motion before us is that the minutes of Middlesex Centre Council meeting held on December 16th be adopted as printed. Is there a mover? Councillor Shipley and seconded by Councillor Scott. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted then. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have one item. The motion before us is that item 7.1 found under the consent agenda for January 6, 2021 be adopted as recommended. Mover, please. Councillor Heffernan and Councillor Scott seconding. Anyone opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to staff reports, section 8. The first item on our agenda today is a report on the grants. Tiffany Farrell, our Director of Corporate Services, will comment on this report. Tiffany? There you are. Good morning.
Morning. Through you, Mayor DeVitt, this report is with respect to the Council Grants Program for 2021. As you can see, everything is outlined for the organizations that the committee has recommended for a grant in 2021. It's important to note that 7 organizations, many of which that we see each year, did not apply for 2021 as due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They have carried forward the funding they received in 2020. Many of these organizations relate to Canada Day celebrations, which we were unable to have in 2020. So we're hoping that will happen in 2021. At this time, I don't have any other comments with respect to the applications, but I'm open to questions from council members if they have any questions on the organizations we're looking at providing grants to.
Okay, thank you for your commentary. Is there any item that council would like to clarify or ask questions on? I don't see any. So the motion before us is that the request from Ethan's Garden be approved in the amount of $2,000. That the request from the Camoka Railway Museum be approved in the amount of $5,000, and that the request from the London and Middlesex Heritage Museum, that is Fanshawe Pioneer Village, be approved in the amount of $2,500, and that the request from Middlesex Centre Archives be approved in the amount of $5,000, and that the request from the Optimist Club of Ilderton be approved in the amount of $600, all in accordance with the council grants policy, and further that staff be directed to prepare correspondence and issue payment on to the above noted organizations. Could I have a mover, please? Deputy Mayor Brennan, and a seconder, Councillor Scott. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. We'll move now to item 8.2, which is with regard to the council vacancy for Ward 4. Our municipal clerk, James Hudson, will provide an overview of that report. James.
Through the chair. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Through the chair.
Okay.
Through the chair. Apologies for the feedback that can everyone hear me okay now?
Maybe speak up a bit. Here.
Through the chair, apologies for the technical difficulties that we're experiencing this morning. Can everyone hear me now? Thank you. Before council today is a report which is required as a result of the resignation that was received from Councillor Derek Silva on Thursday, December 18th, 2020. As a result of this resignation and in accordance with legislative requirements set out in the Municipal Act, council is required to formally recognize this resignation and to declare the seat vacant at their next regularly scheduled meeting of council. As such, the January 6th date that we have here today represents that next regularly scheduled meeting, and we will be asking council to formally declare the seat vacant. In addition, this report further asks that council provide direction to the municipal clerk to prepare a further report to be brought to the February 3rd, 2021 council meeting. This report would address methods to fill the vacant Ward 4 councillor seat. In the report before you today, it briefly outlines the two options available to council under the current legislation for filling this vacancy. And those options are the fulfillment of the vacancy by appointment of a qualified elector or through a by-election to be held in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act. The report brought to you on February 3rd, 2021 will further detail these options. At this time, that is all the comments that I have on this report. I would welcome any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Any questions for the clerk? Okay, seeing none then, the motion before us is that report CLK 01/2021 regarding the vacancy, Ward 4 be received, and that council declares the office of the Ward 4 councillor vacant due to the resignation of Ward 4 councillor Derek Silva, and further that the municipal clerk be directed to bring a report regarding methods to fill the vacant Ward 4 councillor seat to the February 3rd, 2021 council meeting. Do I have a mover? Councillor Arts and a second, Deputy Mayor Brennan. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. There is no county council update today as we've not had our first meeting of the year yet. So we'll move to the enclosed session. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the motion that Council for Municipality of Middlesex Centre adjourn to closed session pursuant to section 239, section 2 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the following matters. Subsection 2B, personal matters about an identified individual, including municipal or local board employees. Under section C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Under section E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. Under section F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Under section K, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Is there a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Scott and Councillor Shipley. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried, and we'll move into closed meeting.
Can I